The final signal, the chrome-blue cube hummed with a frequency that Marcus Chen felt in his bones. 3 years since the Great Silence had stripped Earth of most advanced technology, and this thing was still broadcasting signals that made his neural implants sing with recognition. Marcus pressed his flesh-hand-metal hand against the crumbling concrete wall of what used to be Neo-Singapore's financial district, watching the cube hover exactly 12 feet above the scorched plaza at 28. Marcus carried scars, both visible and hidden. The neural web threading through his skull glowed faintly beneath his dark skin, silver tracery that marked him as one of the last humans whose augmentations had survived the technological collapse. His right arm was a masterwork of biomechanical engineering, sleek titanium and synthetic muscle that responded to thought as naturally as his birth limb once had. Most others like him had died when their implants failed during the silence. Marcus endured because his modifications were different, older, built by hands that understood something the newer generation had forgotten. The morning sun cast long shadows through the skeletal remains of skyscrapers. Vines and moss had begun, reclaiming the city, nature patient in its victory over human ambition. But the cube remained untouched by time or decay, its surface shifting between metallic hues as patterns of light danced across its faceted exterior. Marcus had been tracking the cube's signal for 6 weeks, following electromagnetic breadcrumbs across the Asian continent. His modified scanner, jury-rigged from salvaged parts and powered by a microfusion cell that somehow resisted the silence, had led him here to this moment. The device chirped softly, displaying readings that defied conventional physics, energy, signatures that suggested the cube was not just active, but waiting. Waiting for what? He whispered to the empty plaza. The cube pulsed once, brighter, as if responding to his voice. Marcus felt his neural implants surge with data, streams of information flowing through pathways he didn't know existed in his own mind. Images flashed before his eyes, massive shapes buried beneath the earth, sleeping giants that had slumbered for millennia. Technology that made his own augmentations look primitive by comparison. Marcus Chen. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, resonating through the air around the cube. Not mechanical, not organic, but something that bridged both worlds. Authentication confirmed. Neural signature matches, archived patterns. You are the last. Marcus stepped into the open plaza, augmented reflexes, keeping his balance as debris shifted beneath his feet. The last what? And what are you? I am designation. Sentinel-7. Guardian construct of the Terran defense grid. You are the final human capable of interfacing with our systems. The cube descended slowly, stopping at eye level. Your neural architecture contains elements of the original enhancement. Protocols, modified but still compatible. We have waited 97 years for someone with your specific capabilities to find us. The weight of those words settled on Marcus like a physical burden. Around him, the ruins of civilization stretched toward every horizon. 3 billion. People had died in the aftermath of the Great Silence, not from the technology failure itself, but from the chaos that followed. Wars over remaining resources, plagues that advanced medicine could no longer fight. The simple inability of modern society to function without its electronic nervous system. Waited for what, exactly? To awaken the Guardians. To fulfill the ancient compact made between your species and ours. The Sentinel's light patterns shifted to deep blue. Long ago, when your kind first reached beyond this world, they encountered threats that required ... preparation. Guardians were constructed, buried, programmed to sleep until activated by one who carried the genetic and neural markers of the original engineers. Marcus's augmented vision suddenly overlaid his normal sight with translucent information streams. Global positioning data, energy readings, structural schematics of objects buried deep beneath Earth's surface. 7 locations, scattered across the continents, each one containing something vast and waiting. Guardians, he repeated. You mean weapons? We mean protectors. Titans designed to defend this world against forces that conventional military power cannot address. The Sentinel rotated slowly. Your coalition government has detected our awakening. They approach now with intentions to claim and weaponize what they cannot understand. As if summoned by the Sentinel's words, the distinctive whine of coalition aircraft echoed across the ruined city. Marcus's scanner erupted with proximity warnings as 3 sleek interceptors approached from the south. Their adaptive camouflage making them difficult to track against the morning sky. They found me faster than usual, Marcus muttered, already. Moving toward the nearest building. His years of staying ahead of coalition patrols had taught him the value of cover and concealment. Your neural implants emit a signature they have learned to track, the Sentinel said, keeping pace as it floated beside him. However, this unit can provide temporary shielding. More importantly, activation of the first Guardian will make such pursuit irrelevant. Marcus ducked into the lobby of a collapsed office building, its glass facade long since shattered and cleared by scavengers. And if I refuse? If I decide this is too much responsibility for one person, then the Guardians remain dormant. Your species continues to decline, and when the external threats eventually arrive, your world will be defenseless. The Sentinel's tone remained neutral, but somehow Marcus sensed ancient sadness beneath the mechanical words. We do not compel. We only offer the tools your predecessors created for this moment. The interceptors roared overhead, beginning a search pattern. Marcus knew they would deploy ground teams within minutes, specialists trained to capture him alive. His neural implants were too valuable to simply destroy. The Coalition had been trying to reverse engineer his modifications for years, hoping to restore some measure of prescience capability to their forces. Where's the nearest Guardian site? He asked. 1,700 kilometers southeast, beneath the Australian continental shelf, a construct designated Gaia's Shield awaits activation. The Sentinel projected a 3-dimensional map into Marcus's visual field. However, reaching that location while evading Coalition forces will require assistance. Marcus studied the projected route, calculating distances and resources. I know someone who might help. Sarah Voss runs a resistance cell out of the Darwin ruins. If anyone can get us across the Pacific unseen, it's her. This individual is trustworthy. She saved my life twice and never asked for payment beyond helping other survivors. Marcus replied, already planning their escape route. In this world, that makes her family. The sound of boots on broken glass echoed from the street outside. Coalition ground forces had arrived. Marcus activated his augmentation stealth mode, reducing his heat signature and electromagnetic emissions. The Sentinel, SIMPLY, disappeared, its concealment field so complete that even Marcus's enhanced sensors couldn't detect it. They moved through the building's service levels, navigating maintenance shafts and emergency exits that predated the current crisis. Marcus's knowledge of urban infrastructure, enhanced by his engineering background, allowed them to stay ahead of the search teams. His right arm interfaced directly with old electronic locks. feeding power and control signals that bypassed decades of security protocols. Emerging from a storm drain 3 blocks away, they found themselves at the edge of the old harbor district. The massive container port lay empty, its automated systems long silent, but the deepwater channel remained navigable. If they could reach the far shore, the underground maglev tunnels still functioned on manual systems. "Can you maintain concealment while we travel?" Marcus asked the invisible sentinel. "Affirmative, though prolonged use will drain power reserves. This unit requires periodic access to M-spectrum energy for recharging." Marcus nodded, already adapting his plans. The maglev tunnels have emergency lighting systems. Might be enough to keep you operational. They made their way through the abandoned port, avoiding the main thoroughfares where Coalition patrols would be most active. Marcus's augmented hearing picked up radio chatter from search teams, coordinated sweeps that were steadily closing the net around the harbor district. Time was running short. The tunnel entrance stood, partially concealed behind shipping containers that had sat unmoved since the silence. Marcus's scanner confirmed the maglev system still had power, fed by geothermal generators deep underground. The tracks stretched beneath the ocean floor, connecting to the Australian transport network through a feat of precise engineering that had survived where so much else had failed. "Once we're moving, they won't be able to track us," Marcus said, powering up the manual control systems. "These tunnels are shielded against interference. Your people did good work." "These systems were built by your people," the Sentinel corrected. "We merely provided certain technological enhancements to ensure their survival through catastrophic events." The maglev pod was designed for cargo rather than passengers, but Marcus had made worse accommodations during his years of running from the Coalition. As the pod accelerated through the tunnel, he finally allowed himself to consider the full scope of what the Sentinel was asking of him. 7 Guardians, Titans capable of defending Earth against threats that conventional weapons couldn't handle. The responsibility for awakening them rested on his shoulders alone, carried by neural implants he'd never fully understood until now. Through the pod's small window, emergency lighting cast moving shadows on the tunnel walls. Somewhere ahead lay Australia, Sarah Voss, and the first test of whether humanity was ready to reclaim its role as guardians of Earth. Behind them, the Coalition would be regrouping, planning new approaches to capture the last human who could bridge the gap between old technology and new purpose. Marcus Chen had spent 3 years running from his unique nature. Now, for the first time since the Great Silence, he was running towards something instead. Awakening the sleepers. Maglev pod emerged from the Trans-Pacific Tunnel into dim Australian sunlight, filtered through smoke from distant bushfires that had burned unchecked since the Great Silence. Marcus Chen stepped onto the platform at Darwin Station, his augmented senses immediately cataloguing threats and opportunities in the abandoned transport hub. The Sentinel materialized beside him, its concealment field dropping as it drew power from the station's emergency lighting systems. Environmental analysis indicates significant ecological disruption, the Sentinel observed, its lights dimming slightly as it recharged. Atmospheric carbon levels have increased by 12% since the silence. Without technological intervention, your climate systems are destabilizing. Marcus checked his scanner, confirming their location and searching for Coalition activity. Yeah, well, it turns out civilization was more fragile than anyone wanted to admit. When the smart grids failed, so did everything else. They made their way through Darwin's outskirts, where nature had begun its patient reclamation of human structures. Vines crawled up the sides of apartment buildings, roots cracked foundations, and what had once been suburbs now resembled archaeological sites. But Marcus knew where to look for signs of human habitation. Smoke from cooking fires, carefully tended gardens hidden behind overgrown facades. The subtle markers that indicated Sarah Voss's people were still fighting to survive. The resistance. Safehouse occupied a reinforced warehouse in what used to be the industrial district. Marcus approached the concealed entrance, placing his palm against a scanner, jury-rigged from salvaged parts. After a moment, the heavy door slid open to reveal Sarah Voss herself, her weather-beaten face breaking into a cautious smile. "Marcus." "Chen, you magnificent bastard," she said, pulling him into a brief embrace. "Thought the coalition finally got you when the chatter went quiet 3 weeks ago." Sarah was 35, but looked older, her auburn hair streaked with premature grey, and her green eyes carrying the weight of too many losses. She'd been a military logistics coordinator before the silence, skills that translated well to organizing resistance cells and keeping survivors alive through the chaos that followed. "Had to go dark while I tracked down something important," Marcus replied, gesturing to the sentinel. "Sarah, meet our ticket to changing everything." Sarah's expression shifted to professional wariness as she studied the floating cube. Coalition tech, older, much older. Marcus quickly explained what he'd learned about the Guardians and the Terran defense grid. Watching Sarah's tactical mind process the implications. Sleeping giants buried under the planet, she mused, leading them into the warehouse's main operations center. The space bustled with activity as her team worked on everything from water purification to weapons maintenance. "And you're the only one who can wake them up." "That's the theory," Marcus said, accepting a cup of real coffee, a luxury in the post-silence world. "The question is whether we should." Sarah's team gathered around as Marcus shared the Sentinel's data, projecting holographic displays that showed the Guardian sites and their capabilities. Each Titan was unique, designed for different defensive functions. Gaia's shield, buried beneath the Australian continental shelf, specialized in planetary environmental protection. Storm's Heart, hidden under the Himalayas, controlled weather. Systems across Asia, Ocean's Wrath lay dormant beneath the Atlantic Ridge, its purpose tied to oceanic defense. "Incredible," whispered Dr. Alina Vasquez, Sarah's technical specialist and one of the few scientists who'd managed to keep some equipment functional after the silence. "These energy readings suggest each Guardian has the power output of a small fusion reactor." "More than that," the Sentinel interjected. "Each unit contains manufacturing capabilities, defensive systems, and autonomous repair functions. They were designed to operate independently for millennia if necessary." Marcus studied the faces around him, seeing hope mixed with fear. These people had survived 3 years of hardship, but the prospect of awakening forces beyond their understanding was daunting. "What's the catch?" Sarah asked bluntly. "Power like this doesn't come without a price." The Sentinel's lights shifted to amber, a pattern Marcus was beginning to recognize as uncertainty. Activation requires full neural integration with the Guardian consciousness. The process is ... transformative. The individual who awakens each Titan becomes permanently linked to its systems. "Meaning what, exactly?" Marcus pressed. "Your consciousness would merge with the Guardian's artificial intelligence. You would retain your identity and memories, but you would also become something more than human. The neural pathways in your brain would be enhanced beyond current biological limitations." Dr. Vasquez leaned forward intently. "Evolution, not just augmentation." "In essence, yes," the Sentinel confirmed. Your predecessors designed this system believing humanity would need to transcend its biological constraints to survive future challenges. Marcus felt the weight of that revelation settling on his shoulders. Not just responsibility for awakening the Guardians, but for becoming something fundamentally different in the process. He thought of the 3 billion people who'd died in the aftermath of the silence, the survivors struggling to rebuild in the ruins, and the threats the Sentinel hinted at lurking beyond Earth's borders. "There's something else," Sarah said, studying intelligence reports on her tablet. Coalition forces have been mobilizing globally. Long-range sensors show their fleet moving into position around all 7 Guardian sites simultaneously. They know, Marcus realized. Somehow, they've identified the locations. The Sentinel pulsed with agitation. Coalition surveillance networks have been monitoring this unit's signals since initial contact. They lacked the ability to activate the Guardians, but they could attempt to destroy them or capture them for study. "Not if we get there first," Sarah said, already pulling up tactical maps. "My contacts in the Pacific Alliance still have some functional submarines. We could reach the Australian site within 18 hours. Dr. Vasquez was scanning data streams from her monitoring equipment. "Marcus, your neural implants are showing increased activity. The proximity to the Sentinel is affecting your brain chemistry." Marcus touched the silver tracery beneath his skin, feeling the subtle warmth of enhanced neural pathways. "Getting me ready for the integration." "Preparing your consciousness for expansion," the Sentinel corrected. "The process cannot be forced, but it can be facilitated through gradual exposure to Guardian technologies." Through the warehouse's reinforced windows, the sound of aircraft engines grew louder. Sarah's perimeter guards were reporting Coalition interceptors approaching from multiple directions, their search patterns indicating they'd tracked the Sentinel signal despite its concealment efforts. "Time to move," Sarah announced, her team already grabbing essential equipment and weapons. The subs waiting at the old commercial dock. "If we're going to do this, it has to be now." As they prepared to leave, Marcus caught Sarah's arm. "You know this might be a one-way trip for me. If the integration process changes me as much as the Sentinel suggests." Sarah's expression softened briefly. "Marcus, you've been changing since the day I met you. Growing stronger, more capable, more willing to carry the weight the rest of us can't. Maybe this is just the next step in who you were always meant to become." The Coalition aircraft was circling closer, their engines creating a thunderous backdrop to their escape preparations. Marcus took a deep breath, feeling his neural implants respond to his emotional state with subtle adjustments to his brain chemistry. For 3 years, he'd thought of his augmentations as a burden, making him a target in a world that no longer understood such technology. Now he was beginning to see them as preparation for a responsibility he'd never imagined. They moved through Darwin's ruins in coordinated groups, using predetermined routes that kept them below the aircraft's scanning range. The Sentinel maintained its concealment field, but Marcus could sense the strain the prolonged invisibility was placing on its power systems. The submarine waited at the end of a partially collapsed pier, its hull scarred by years of operation in increasingly dangerous waters. Captain Maria Santos greeted them with the grim efficiency of someone who'd learned to trust quickly or die slowly in the post-silence world. "Word is, the Coalition's got hunter-killer groups moving toward every major landmass," she reported as they descended into the sub's cramped interior. "Whatever you're planning, they're planning to stop it." As the submarine submerged into the dark Pacific waters, Marcus found himself standing in the observation deck, watching the surface disappear above them. Somewhere ahead lay the first Guardian, waiting for him to make a choice that would reshape his understanding of what it meant to be human. The Sentinel floated beside him, its lights reflecting off the reinforced windows. "Doubt is natural," it said quietly. "Your predecessors experienced similar uncertainty when they designed this system. Did they ever activate it themselves?" Marcus asked. "No. They believed the Guardians should only awaken when humanity faced threats beyond conventional response. Their wisdom was in creating tools for descendants they would never see, trusting that when the time came, individuals like yourself would have the courage to use them." Through the submarine's hull, Marcus could hear the deep ocean sounds that spoke of vast spaces and hidden depths. Soon they would reach the Guardian site, and he would face the choice that would determine not just his own future, but the future of every human who had survived the Great Silence. For the first time in years, Marcus Chen was no longer running from his destiny. He was racing toward it, carried by the dark waters toward a transformation that would either save his species or fundamentally change what it meant to be human at all.